Chapter 9. He was at the center of the Hourglass. At the start of 2000, the search for the second mole was not going well. The Brian Kelly investigation had stalled, as well it should, since he was innocent. But there were unresolved mysteries still gnawing at the counterspies about cases aside from the warning to Felix Bloch that pointed to another mole. Ames had insisted he turned over all the CIA, FBI, and foreign intelligence sources he knew about on June 13, 1985. But three assets working for the CIA and MI6, British intelligence, had been summoned to Moscow before that date. Leonid Poleshchuk, the KGB's deputy resident for counterintelligence in Lagos, Nigeria, had been working for the CIA since he was first recruited in Nepal in 1974. He had been lured home, apparently in April 1985, when the KGB floated a bogus story to him that an apartment in Moscow, always extremely difficult to find, had become available. Poleshchuk wanted to give an apartment to his son, Andrei, a journalist. After the KGB man returned from Lagos, he was arrested and executed. Oleg Gordievsky was the KGB resident in London. On May 17, 1985, he received a cable ordering him to report to Moscow urgently for high-level talks. Gordievsky knew he was in mortal danger. He had been at headquarters in Moscow only 4 months earlier, with no hint of trouble. "Cold fear started to run down my back," Gordievsky told me, "because I knew it was a death sentence." Still, he could not be certain that the KGB had discovered he was spying for the British Secret Service with the knowledge of the CIA. If he refused the order to return home, he would be dismissed and lose his high-level post in the KGB. Gordievsky gambled and flew to Moscow. It was the wrong choice. He was confronted, accused as a spy, and drugged. The British had provided him with an escape plan if he was ever in trouble. He signaled MI6, which was able to exfiltrate him, smuggle him to safety over the border to Finland inside a hidden compartment in a Land Rover, and on to Britain. Colonel Sergei Bokan was the deputy resident in Athens of the GRU, the Soviet military intelligence arm. As the deputy, Bokan knew all of the GRU's spy operations aimed at Greece, the United States, and the other NATO countries. On May 17, 1985, he received a cable saying that his son Alex was in trouble in military school, and urging that he take an early vacation to deal with the problem. Bokan, whose boyhood nickname was Mole, knew it was not true, and a death trap. Only a few days earlier he had called his brother-in-law in Kiev, where Alex was in school, and was assured that his son was doing well and his grades were fine. As soon as he could leave the embassy, he telephoned an emergency number for his CIA contact. Painfully, he bade his wife and a 10-year-old daughter goodbye, and said he was going for a jog, not knowing whether he would ever see them again. A CIA plane was waiting for him after dark, and he was on his way out of Athens to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. 6 years later, he was finally reunited with his family in the U.S. These three 1985 cases strongly suggested that there was a mole inside U.S. intelligence, but they were not conclusive. Ames later confessed that Poleshchuk, Bokan, and Gordievsky were among the names he turned over to the KGB. The problem for the counterspies was that the three fell under suspicion before Ames said he turned over their names to the KGB on June 13, 1985. But Ames could have been mistaken about the date, or lying. As a result, the strongest evidence for a second mole remained the KGB's warning to Felix Bloch that he was under an FBI investigation. Someone had told the KGB about the investigation, and the KGB had, in turn, warned Bloch. So the mole hunt continued. In 1994, after the arrest of Ames, Michael Rochford had been moved from FBI headquarters to the Washington field office, where he became head of the special squad attempting to find the penetration of U.S. intelligence agencies. Ames did not know about the Block investigation, so he could not have warned the KGB about the FBI investigation. There had to be someone else. For the next 6 years, Rochford continued plugging away in Operation Pennywise, approaching dozens of SVR and former KGB officers, dangling $1 million to any who might provide clues to the identity of the mole. He also traveled to London a dozen times to interview Vasily Mitrokhin, a KGB archivist who in 1972 began copying sensitive files, at first on scraps of paper that he hid in his shoes. He buried his notes and documents under the floorboard of his country dacha. In 1992, he delivered his trove to British intelligence, which spirited him, his archive, and his family to Britain. Mitrokhin was able to provide leads to thousands of KGB agents and operations all over the world. Several U.S. spies were caught and sent to prison as a result of information in Mitrokhin's archive. They made the mistake of boasting about their spying for the Russians when they were contacted by Dmitry Drujinsky, a multilingual FBI agent who successfully impersonated a KGB officer during his extraordinary, almost 30-year career. But none of the data in Mitrokhin's archive led to the identity of the second mole burrowed inside U.S. intelligence. To find out the truth was the job of the FBI's Intelligence Division. Its agents were responsible for arresting spies, infiltrating foreign intelligence services, and recruiting their agents to work for the FBI. The division was divided into sections. One of these housed the Soviet Analytical Unit, the research arm of the Bureau's spy catchers. Perhaps, the division chiefs reasoned, something might be learned if the analysts, looking back to the beginning of the Cold War, studied every report from a recruitment or a defector that hinted at possible penetrations of the FBI by Soviet intelligence. Just possibly, it was hoped, a pattern could be divined that might point to a current penetration, if one existed. Within the Soviet unit, two experienced analysts, Bob King and Jim Milburn, were assigned to read the debriefings of Soviet defectors and reports of Soviet intelligence sources who had, over the years, been recruited as spies by the FBI. James P. Milburn was not a name known outside of the closed world of intelligence, but he was greatly respected within the FBI for his knowledge of Soviet intelligence and his analytical skills. If the Bureau had a complex problem involving the KGB, it would usually turn to Milburn. He also spent time working on KGB problems at the CIA. Red-haired and freckled, powerfully built, and about 6 feet tall, Milburn liked to play basketball on his lunch hour in the Bureau gym. He would get into games with guys from records and fingerprinting, Paul Moore, a former FBI China analyst, said. He's a 30-something going up against these young guys from the ident division. He got injured a lot. Bad injuries doing that sort of stuff. Robert H. King was a veteran Foreign Counterintelligence, FCI, analyst. He had an exceptional memory for details and a singular ability to connect seemingly unrelated events. King had come to the Bureau from the CIA, a relatively unusual career path that led to some good-natured needling in the FBI. I used to accuse him of being a CIA penetration of the FBI, Moore said. In his previous work at the CIA, King had also been a Soviet analyst. The FBI analysts, as one colleague explained, are looking for anomalies, possible penetrations anywhere in the government. They have read all the defector debriefings. They might see something and say, "Well, this is strange, isn't it?" A typical anomaly would be, normally it takes a certain amount of time to go from lieutenant to major in the KGB. Why was this Soviet promoted early? Was anybody else promoted who worked in the Washington Residency at a certain time period? Maybe a bunch of medals were passed out. If the FBI learned KGB people got medals, it was often for handling an American source. Another tip-off. More broadly, the whole Soviet analytical unit was looking for penetrations. The people in the unit were specialized. Some might look at Line X, KGB efforts to gather S&T, science and technology material. Some specialized in illegals, and so on. The two analysts working on the mole study shared a cubicle in room 4835 at FBI headquarters with their supervisor. The supervisor, a tall 44-year-old man, was not a popular figure among his fellow special agents. Although known for his skill with computers, he was somber and unsociable. His nickname in the bureau was Dr. Doom. He had been born in Chicago, served for a while as a police officer in that city, and had joined the FBI in 1976. Now he was responsible for preparing and overseeing the mole study. For the supervisor, directing the analysis to help discover a possible mole was a task of exquisite irony, for he knew who had turned over the names of the FBI sources, Valery Martinov and Sergei Motorin, to the KGB. He knew there was, in fact, an active mole inside the FBI, passing the Bureau's most highly classified secrets to Moscow. He knew the spy was a trusted counterintelligence agent at FBI headquarters. He knew, in fact, that the spy was a supervisory special agent inside the Soviet analytical unit. He knew all this, but could tell no one. And for good reason. Robert Hansen was looking for himself. The two analysts assigned to the mole study, and Hansen, as its supervisor, had the advantage over the others in the unit. Most analysts looked at specific targets, such as the various KGB lines, and did not know much outside their own specialized areas, Paul Moore explained. But a few people did all source, and that was Milburn, King, and Hansen. Within the Soviet analytical unit, Hansen, in other words, was one of the very few entitled to know all the FBI's sources and secrets. Or as David Major, a veteran former FBI and White House counterintelligence official, put it, he was at the center of the hourglass. He saw everything. And gave it all to the Russians. Robert Hansen had been spying for the Russians for years, but had so far been undetected by either the FBI or the CIA. When the study was complete, it was approved by Hansen and classified top secret. He wrapped it up and left it at a dead drop for the KGB. The drop, which the KGB designated Park, was under a wooden footbridge near the entrance to Nottoway Park, a location convenient to his home in Vienna, in Northern Virginia. The volatile, critical nature of its contents was protected by a stern warning on the first page. In view of the extreme sensitivity of this document, the utmost caution must be exercised in its handling. The contents include a comprehensive review of sensitive source allegations and investigations of penetration of the FBI by the Soviet intelligence services, the disclosure of which would compromise highly sensitive counterintelligence operations and methods. Access should be limited to a strict need-to-know basis. The study was so highly classified because, if leaked, it could endanger the lives of Soviets who were helping the FBI. The study identified the sources who had hinted at moles in the Bureau, and exactly what each had said. Moscow could now enjoy the product of this intensive secret effort by the FBI's Soviet analytical unit. In exchange, the KGB gave Hansen $25,000 in cash and asked for data on several topics, including FBI surveillance techniques and recruitment operations. The exchange was typical of the method used by Hansen to conceal his identity. He would turn over secrets, either documents or computer disks, in dead drops and get paid in exchange, in dead drops. He wrote letters to the KGB, but was careful to give no hint of who he was or in what agency he worked. To signal that a drop was ready to be cleared, Hansen would leave a chalk mark on a mailbox or a tape on a telephone pole or a park sign. His hope was that by never disclosing his name, he would protect himself from a source in the KGB who might betray him. Betrayal is at the very core of espionage, but it works both ways. No matter how careful a spy might be, someone on the other side might bring about his downfall. Hansen knew that and worried about it. Eventually, he wrote in one letter to the KGB, "I would appreciate an escape plan. Nothing lasts forever."